Imagine you're in a graduation ceremony. You know the keynote speaker. You are waiting for the big moment when the keynote speaker is being introduced. You are aware the fact that you helped to set the tone for the keynote speaker because you helped to provide the speech introduction. Yet, as you're witnessing the introduction of the keynote speaker, the two of you realize that everything that's being spoken is too much information. It's so much information that you're beginning to witness the entire audience grow restless. Some of them are talking to one another, getting up and walking around. Even a few of them have left out of the auditorium. By the time the keynote speaker is actually brought on the stage, it's approximately 10 minutes after being introduced. You and the keynote speaker later have a discussion about what went wrong. And what you recognize is that what went wrong was the information provided for the speech introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassandra, Diva of Dialogue Lee. I am the WAO sponsor, mentor, and charter member. I am a professional speaker, corporate trainer, and the introducer, or I should say, the speech introduction provider in that story. See, the story I shared with you is from an actual experience of having the opportunity of witnessing my first boss, who actually shared the alma mater with me of the University of Illinois at Brandon-Champaign. We were so excited when he received an invitation to speak at the Black Invocation for the campus. What we didn't know was the fact that the individuals who would introduce him for that keynote speech would use every single word that was provided on the biography information submitted to create the speech introduction. Now, having had some experience during that time with Toastmasters International, realized there should be a note put on the information that was faxed over to the school. The note basically said, here is the resume. Pull from the resume what you need in order to create the speech introduction. That was my first boss laughing at me. You're just making extra work for yourself. You didn't need to do that. They already know they should use the resume and create a speech introduction. I said to my boss, you have no idea how many people understand a speech introduction. I just learned about it being involved in speechcraft for Toastmasters International. I doubt if a student on campus at U of I actually understands this. Well, the last laugh was on him because the day of the graduation, as he was preparing to walk from the wing onto the stage, he realized time is a ticking and the young lady is still speaking, and she is still speaking everything from his resume as opposed to have created an actual speech introduction. Well, this particular video is for you, everyone. It's to assist you with understanding the benefit of a speech introduction. It is to make certain that the next time you have the opportunity to be introduced, you have control over what the audience hears. You will have the ability to be introduced in a way where the audience will be excited to hear from you as opposed to tired of hearing about you. My first boss learned a lesson, and so did I. That's, I think, when I became a crusader for speech introductions, creating them in the proper way. In this presentation, I'm going to assist you with creating speech introductions that you can use inside of the Wrightwood Ashburn Overcomers WAO Toastmasters Club, in addition to using speech introductions outside of Toastmasters as well. As we make our journey into this presentation, I want you to recognize that with a speech introduction, you are able to make a statement, and I want you to use the speech introduction for your benefit. When you're making a statement with your speech introduction, it is because you are allowing your speech introductions to become a vital part of your speaking experience. Understand that with a well-written speech introduction, it can actually help the success of your speech, whereas a poorly written introduction will hinder your speech's success. Good introductions help to build curiosity and suspense for your speech. At that graduation ceremony, I and my first boss learned firsthand the residual effect of a poorly written speech introduction, or in our case, a speech introduction that didn't exist at all. What we recognized was the importance of how that speech introduction sets the tone for your speech. It builds curiosity and suspense for your audience. It allows them to be prepared for what you're going to share with them in your speech. I want you to keep the speech introductions as a vital part of your speaking experience. Therefore, don't create it last minute. Also, don't disregard it. Make certain that you spend time, that you create it in a way where it can help the success of your speech. A speech introduction, you have to understand, is different from a bio. We call it a bio and an intro, yet keep in mind that a bio is simply a biography. A biography allows you to cover information that spans years and months and days and hours and minutes. You get the gist, meaning a biography can cover a lot of information about you, which means you can tell the audience about your accomplishments, your awards, your birthplace, your education, your place of employment, your hobbies, your interests, the skills that you have, your social involvement, your talents, the titles you have, and even your work experience. Phew. Didn't that sound like a lot of information that you can actually share with your audience? It is. A biography allows you to cover everything that you can think of about you. Yet let me tell you something. A biography is not what your audience wants to hear when you are about to speak. Therefore, don't send them a biography. Provide them with an introduction for the actual speech. Your biography, oh, that's about you. A resume, that's about you. What my boss and I learned was that resume which we sent was the catalyst that made it a downfall for what was said to introduce him and his speech. Did I tell you that his resume was like 4 pages long? Yeah, 4 pages worth of information that the student had to thumb through. So we thought. Really, it was 4 pages of information that she literally read through that took over 10 minutes to do. That 10-minute introduction actually went against the time for an introduction. We want introductions to be as brief as we can, and biographies, resumes, because they're about you, typically don't allow the speech introduction to be brief. Therefore, keep in mind, create a speech introduction because a speech introduction is about your speech. Give the details about your speech that will help to set the tone. Drop in details and examples or suspenseful insight that will make your audience curious about what you're going to say in your actual speech. Whether your speech is 3 minutes long, 5 minutes long, 15 minutes long, or even 45, you want that 45-minute speech to be have, or I should say it this way, you want that 45-minute speech to have the tone set for it by that brief speech introduction. Again, a biography is about you. A speech introduction is about your speech. Use a speech introduction to set the tone for your speech, to build curiosity for your speech, and to become a success tool for your speech. Your speech introduction has multiple benefits. Many individuals benefit from your speech introduction, including your audience. I'm thinking back. I was a part of the audience that day. And I tell you, being an audience member, listening to a speech introduction that was going on for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Are you kidding me? It's turning into 10 minutes long. As an audience member, I was irritated. I was tired of hearing about him, and I knew him. The idea is your speech introduction is supposed to get the audience excited. Now, the first few sentences the young lady spoke about him did get people excited because they were like, oh, wow, this is someone that used to be a member of the school or a student of the school. This is someone who understands our campus life. This is someone who has gone off and become successful, has multiple degrees, has graduated cum laude, and now they're tired of hearing about him because the resume was read as opposed to a speech introduction being provided. Allow your speech introduction to benefit your audience. Your audience will learn more about who you are, what you do, and why you are speaking before them at that time. Your speech introduction, not your bio, will set the tone for helping your audience to know more about you. And remember, the speech introduction is a really brief mini intro of who you are, what you do, and why you're speaking. Give the audience the courtesy of having a speech introduction. That way, they will learn these details about you. Here's another benefit for your speech introduction. Your speech introduction will benefit your audience as well as the MC, the master of ceremony, or the mistress of ceremonies. I know there have been plenty of times when I've served as the MC for district level events, outside of Toastmaster function events, and even inside of WAO events. We know that the Toastmaster is the MC at every Toastmaster event. Yet outside of a Toastmaster environment, we're using the term MC, Mr. of Ceremonies, Mistress of Ceremonies. An MC needs a speech introduction. When you provide your MC with a speech introduction, you're providing them with effective transitional information that they can speak and share with your audience. Your MC is helping to do some of the work for you regarding your speech. Did you realize that? When you do a well-written speech introduction, your speech introduction helps to do some of the legwork for your speech. And the MC gets the opportunity to carry on some of that legwork for you. Again, your speech introduction is going to provide effective transitional information that you can share with your audience. And keep in mind, I say that you can share, that's because you're writing it, you're constructing it, you're putting the message together that will then be passed on to the MC who will speak that information on your behalf. Let the MC have that transitional information that will assist with setting the tone for your speech. One other benefit for the speech introduction. I've mentioned that the speech introduction will help your audience. The speech introduction will help your MC. The speech introduction also helps you, the speaker. You are the speaker. There is only so much information that you can provide in your actual speech. Depending upon the time limit that you have for your speech, you may find the speech introduction can be used to include a few extra nuggets of information that will again set the tone, yet cover something that you may not have time for. In addition to that thought, take into account that when you create a speech introduction, it will benefit you by making certain you can provide relevant, key information and facts that you want to have specifically shared with your audience for that particular speech. Keep this in mind. A biography is covering your life, different aspects of your life. When it comes to the speech, your audience doesn't need to know every aspect of your life. What they will need to know are beneficial information about that particular speech. Again, your speech introduction will allow you to provide the relevant information, the relevant facts that your audience will need to know. Therefore, use the speech introduction because it definitely will help your audience, your MC, and you as the speaker. Now I sigh. I sigh because I actually am thinking back to the real life situation, working with my boss and having that conversation about the speech introduction. He thought we were pressed for time. Actually, he said he was pressed for time. The school was pressed for time. They needed something quick. He was faxing over his resume. I said, no, we need to create a speech introduction. And I learned how to do it in Speechcraft with Toastmasters. He went, no, they need this now. Go ahead and fax it over. Well, in faxing it over on that fax cover letter, I actually wrote that note. Review and pull facts that you need to create your own speech introduction. My instincts knew the individual didn't know how to actually create a speech introduction. My hope, though, was if the student didn't know how to create it, some of the adult staff members would know. Well, we later learned no one really knew how to create a speech introduction. They just simply went with what was sent. We want you to send the right information so you can always be introduced properly. That goes for inside of a Toastmaster meeting and outside of a Toastmaster meeting. Therefore, I want to share with you now how to create a speech introduction. There is a formula. We call it the 3 C's formula. No, it doesn't stand for Cassandra anyway, yet they do begin with the first letter of my name, which is C. They're quite simple to remember, though, if you ingrain them in your mind. The first C is content. Content of your speech introduction, you are deciding. The content of your speech introduction is what is going to help to set the tone for your actual speech. Therefore, you have to think about and make certain you dedicate time to creating your speech introduction. Remember, I said before, don't disregard it. Make certain you pay attention to it. And the first C that you pay attention to for your speech introduction is content. Content is the sentence that helps to describe to your audience what you're planning to talk about. This is the sentence that helps to build that connection with your audience. This is the sentence that gives you the ability to answer the question for your audience and even for yourself. What am I going to say? This is the sentence that gives you the ability to answer, what will I talk about? When you can answer, what will I talk about and what am I going to say? You now have an idea of the information you can put in the content sentence. Notice I'm saying sentence simply because we know a speech introduction should be brief. Could you potentially have two content sentences? Sure, you can. However, the more succinct you can make the sentence, the more brief you can make that sentence, the more succinct the overall speech introduction will be. Therefore, think about the fact that you're going to have 3 C's, which means at a minimum, you will have 3 sentences in your speech introduction. Nice, concise, and brief. That first sentence, remember, that will be your content sentence, the sentence that lets your audience know what you plan to talk about. The second C is going to be the C on context. Context is going to give you the ability to share with your audience the information that explains why that particular topic. Why are you talking about this topic? Why is this topic important for your audience? Remember, you're going to start your speech introduction with your content sentence. Your content sentence will help to establish a connection with your audience. The context sentence continues that connection. When you can let the audience know why you are talking about that particular topic at this particular time, oh, now they begin to understand why that topic is important. When you're creating your context sentence, consider it from the standpoint of, why should anyone care about this? Put your speech introduction together by making certain you can answer the question of why your audience should care. Let them know the topic you're speaking on. Let them know why that topic is important. Let them know why that topic is important now, and even why is that topic important for them. If you can get several of those statements, I want to say answered, yet if you can provide information for several of those statements, it will allow you to provide your audience the details they need to know in order to understand why this topic, why at this time, and why they should care about it. 3 C's for your speech introduction. And thus far, we've looked at 2. We know content, we understand context. Now let's talk about the final C, and the final C is credibility. Credibility is going to give you the opportunity to establish yourself as the expert. The expert. We are all experts in our own right. We are experts in something. Your speeches, especially in Toastmasters, your speeches allow you to bring your expertise to the forefront. Credibility is going to be that concise sentence that allows you to share your credentials. This is where you begin to hear information about who people are and why they are an expert on that particular topic. You in Toastmasters usually share your credentials for that particular topic. It lets the audience know even more about why you, why this topic, and why now. Think about answering that question of, who am I anyway? Who am I? Why should they listen to me? I know we've heard several speeches already this club year on sleep, and each member who delivered a speech about sleep were not sleep experts, meaning they were not scientists that wrote journal papers that appeared in the American Journal of Psychology. No, they were experts because they presented the topic of sleep from their firsthand experience with it. Usually, that's what you're doing with every speech, and your speech introduction can help to bring that information to light. Let your audience know if it's a firsthand experience, or if it's information that you've researched, or if it's a mentor that you've gotten the information from and you're going to share it with them because you know it. Again, credibility is going to be important. Who are you? And why should they listen to you? Your speech introduction helps to answer those questions. The speech introduction covers the 3 C's: the content, the context, and the credibility. What I would like to do now is to share with you a few speech introductions that you may have actually heard. 3 different versions, yet I think they are all 3 versions that do a pretty good job of representing content, context, and credibility. Here's the first example. Bill Murrill is working on his second set of competent communication speeches. A WAO member for over a year, Bill enjoys sharing his passion for life, love for family, and faith in God through his opportunities in speaking, listening, and teamwork activities. Just back from the spring 2010 Chicago District Conference, where Bill competed in his 15th speech competition. Let's welcome Bill Murrill. What a great weekend. What a great weekend, Bill Murrill. Yay. Yes, that is an actual speech introduction that Bill did back in 2010 for his speech that he entitled, What a Great Weekend. Did you hear content, what this speech is about? Yeah, you heard content, what this speech is about. You heard that he's back from the district conference. So we know somehow this speech on what a great weekend will be covering the content of the district conference. Did he provide context? Why this particular speech, or why now? Yes, it's there because we know he just came back from the spring conference and now he's doing a speech entitled, What a Great Weekend. There's a connection there. We're understanding why now, why this speech. Did we hear credibility? Yes, we did. We know that Bill is working on his second set of competent communication speeches. And I chuckle because we know at this moment in which this is being recorded, the competent communication manuals no longer exist. Yet back in 2010, Bill was doing his second set, which means he had already done 10 speeches. He was doing another set of 10. So that leads to his credibility. We also learned about how long he's been a member of WAO, what he has a passion for, and we saw a variety of the family, his faith, and his passion for life itself. Credibility, context, and content was heard in this speech introduction. Notice is also not long. Literally what you see on the screen is literally what he used as his speech introduction. And oh, I should have asked you to time it. I would imagine I spoke that speech introduction in 60 seconds or less, which again makes it brief, succinct, and effective. Let's take a look at a second speech introduction example. And Sonia Gibbs moved into another space when she made the decision to step into Toastmasters in 2014. She thought this would be a good place to expand her knowledge and be in an iron sharpens iron environment. She thought before joining, she was a good leader who needed to get better. She knew she could talk, but soon realized she was a mediocre speaker. Toastmasters has evolved Ansonia into an iron sharpens iron environment where she has also developed her planning phase. Let us hear how Ansonia developed in her innovative planning phase with Who Plans? I Plan, and You Should Too. Again, another literal speech introduction. This is a speech introduction that we heard a few months ago, which actually gave us, again, another example of content, context, as well as credibility. This speech introduction example is also brief, succinct, and could be spoken in 60 seconds or less by the MC. Notice that Ansonia has been a member since 2014. There is a lot of biography information, I am sure, which could have been provided to us. Yet because this was not a bio and it was a speech intro, we only heard the brief biographical points, such as the fact that, or I should say credibility points, which lead to the fact that she has been involved in Toastmasters in order to be in an iron sharpens iron environment. She wanted to get better in speaking. She wanted to get better in leading. And she found while being in the environment, she got better at planning as well. A lot of brief details. The content is there. The context is there. And so was the credibility. One more example. I think this last example is going to be another one that you can hear all three of the C's as well. Therefore, let's move to it now. That way we can take a look at it. Have you ever spent hours and hours trying to get your butterflies to line up only to realize that your butterflies were never meant to line up? Now I have to pause there because I am loving this speech introduction. This is a speech introduction that follows a formula that I typically use. One of the ways to draw your audience in is to ask a question where the you pronoun can be used, and boom, you make an immediate connection with your audience. Again, have you ever spent hours and hours trying to get your butterflies to line up only to realize that butterflies were never meant to line up? This has been the repeated experience of our next speaker. Becky first joined a Toastmasters club right here in Chicago in 1993, and since then has been in numerous clubs in Tucson, Arizona, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Goshen, Indiana, and Oklahoma City. Today, Becky will present the Level 2 project from Presentation Mastery. This project focuses on how to recognize body language used when speaking publicly and how to use gestures to enhance speech content. Becky will tell us how she plans on letting those butterflies fly free as she begins a new life as a speaker. If you've ever had problems with butterflies, pay attention to learn new ways to approach your speaking. Let's welcome Becky with a different way. Yay! Again, another real speech introduction. This speech introduction, I think, does a phenomenal job with being able to capture content, context, and credibility. Starting off with that question, making certain the audience knew she's talking to them, her speech can benefit them, the speech will give them something they can walk away with was great, ending her speech introduction with a sentence that directs the audience to pay attention and to touch on something that they may have a commonality with, problems with butterflies. From start to finish, Becky's speech introduction does a phenomenal job with bringing in the connection, keeping the connection for the audience while making the speech introduction brief and full of the context as well as the credibility, all within the content. Three different examples of speech introductions, and each of them were written by the speaker, not by the person doing the introduction of the speaker. Did you notice what I said? Each speech introduction was written by the speaker, not by the person who was introducing the speaker. As I go back to my example of my real life moment, having my first boss being introduced for his keynote speaking role, we put the responsibility of creating his speech introduction in the hands of the person who was introducing him. And what we found out was it was a disaster. It was such a disaster that he never forgot it. He always made certain I was a part of creating the speech introductions after that. And I always made sure I practiced writing speech introductions. Well, the great thing was I was a member of Toastmasters eventually, and I could do it much easily than I first knew about it. Yet I knew about it at that time based on the 3 C's formula. So I want to recap with you and recap these key points. Remember, with speech introductions, the main insight we want you to know is use speech introductions. They are so helpful for setting the tone of your speech. I said earlier that speech introductions are a vital part of the speaking experience, and I truly did mean that. Having witnessed speech introductions not being used effectively, and having had that experience where a resume was used as a speech introduction, ah, we don't want disasters. We want the right tone to always be set before you speak. And that's why you should write your own speech introduction and make certain that you use one inside of and outside of Toastmasters. The other idea I want you to hold on to is the key difference between bios and intros. Remember, I said earlier, a speech biography or a speech bio is about you, the speaker. And many times we call it the speaker bio. However, an intro or a speech introduction is for your speech. Do your speech intro and make certain that you write it. When you write your speech introductions, keep in mind, it helps to give your audience information they need to know. It helps your MC to have the transitional information they need to introduce you. And then it helps you, the speaker, to provide key information that your audience should know and also that you may not have time to share in your time limited speech. So your speech introduction helps your audience, your MC, and you, the speaker. When you're using the speech introduction, write it so it benefits everyone by using the 3 C's. Your content, what this speech introduction is about, or what your speech is about, rather. So put in the speech introduction what your speech is about. Be able to answer that question of, what am I going to say? What will I talk about? The second C is to make certain that you cover context. Context is giving you the ability to answer that question. Why should they care about this? Why is sleep important? Why is planning important? Whatever your topic is, let the audience know in your speech introduction why they should care about that topic. And the last C is the C of credibility. Who are you? Why are you talking about this topic? Why should they even pay attention to you? What's your expertise? Why are you the one talking about this topic at this time? Your 3 C's will allow you to create a speech introduction that benefits your audience, that benefits your MC, and that benefits you. As long as you're using the 3 C's of content, context, and credibility, you will create a 60-second speech introduction that wows your audience, sets the tone, and makes them curious, and most importantly, gives them some insight as to what you will talk about. Of course, WAO members, if you need any additional resources on speech introductions, I want you to log into our website, go to our members download section, check out the scripts folder, and you'll find 2 cheat sheets for speech introductions. The first one, the first one allows you to create the type of speech introductions that I was describing here using the 3 C's. If that is a little overwhelming for you, there is a second formula that you can use, a second formula that I perhaps will create another video on at a later time. Yet that second formula, the second version of the script, will still give your audience the information they need to know. They'll still learn the content, the context, and the credibility, yet it will be formatted in a slightly different way. It's much more of a template version where you're simply using information about your speech, the path you're in, the level you're at, as well as the purpose of your speech, details that you can pull from your speech evaluation. The template version is easier for some people to use, yet the 3 C's version, as I like to call it, the longer version, the creative version, because that's really what it is. The version I described here is a lot more creative. You have more creative reign over your speech introductions. And as we saw, the 3 examples I shared, each of them were done by the speaker. They were created with their own words. That was not a template. Yet either way, you want to create your speech introduction, WAO members, you do have access to those 2 scripts. So log in, member download section, go to the scripts folder, look for the cheat sheet for introduction. So the cheat sheet for speech introduction 1, the cheat sheet for speech introduction 2. You will have 2 different versions that you can start practicing and using in WAO meetings for your next speech and your next speech introduction. The key, everyone, is that I want you to use the speech introduction for your next speech. And I want you to use that speech introduction for your next speech in Toastmasters and outside of Toastmasters. And as I sigh, I don't ever want you to be in a situation outside of Toastmasters, especially where your audience is sick and tired about hearing about you and ready for your speech, and they are not getting to the speech yet. So do that speech introduction that sets the tone in the right way for your speech. Everyone, it gave me great pleasure to provide you with this learning moment, this mentor moment on speech introductions. Until next time, I say be creative, create that speech introduction, and allow it to set the correct tone for your next speech. Bye for now.